The sharp crack of a slap shattered the wedding ballroom, silencing all 145 guests in an instant. My glasses flew from my face, landing in pieces across the glittering floor, each shard reflecting the stunned, frozen stares surrounding me. My cheek burned, but it was the pain in my chest that cut deepest the searing agony of being humiliated by my newlywed daughter-in-law, right in front of everyone. Vanessa Blake, still draped in her pristine white wedding gown, screamed with venom. "That's what you get for being selfish. A woman your age doesn't need that much space." Her words slithered through the air like poison. In a heartbeat, the grand ballroom transformed into a courtroom, and I was the one on trial, judged by silence. No one came forward. No one reached out to help as I knelt, trembling, to gather the shattered glass. Some guests averted their eyes. Others whispered behind trembling hands. But not a single person dared stand up for the mother of the groom who had just been slapped. Not even my son, Daniel Carter, who stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor as if I no longer existed. And in that moment, I saw it with brutal clarity. The final boundary had been crossed. For months, I had endured subtle jabs, thinly veiled insults, and cold eyes hiding behind hollow smiles. But this slap, this public betrayal, was the breaking point. Slowly, I rose to my feet, my tears falling freely now, but something else awakening inside me. Because beneath the quiet, humble exterior I had worn for so long, I held secrets no one, not even my son, had ever known. And from that moment forward, this story was no longer just mine. It was the beginning of a truth that would unravel everything. It was a bitter winter afternoon, 18 months ago, when I opened the creaky wooden door of my riverside cottage and came face to face for the first time with the piercing, judgmental stare of Vanessa Blake. She stood there, wrapped in a silver designer coat, the heavy scent of her perfume drowning out the soft lavender from the candle flickering on the table. Her nose wrinkled the moment she stepped inside. Her high heels clicked sharply against the worn wooden floor, each step a silent declaration of dominance. Her eyes scanned the room with barely concealed distaste, from the scratched oak chairs draped in yellowed lace to the narrow kitchen corner where the rusty stovetop hissed faintly before settling on the old radio, playing a melancholic classical tune. "Oh my God, I can't believe this is the home of my future mother-in-law," she scoffed, half shocked, half mocking. "This place looks like some dusty museum exhibit." I didn't reply. I just stood still, as I had so many times before, letting my breath dissolve into the cold air. Vanessa would visit the house with Daniel, my son, once or twice a month, and each visit felt like a quiet form of torture. Her words always carried a hint of intrusion, as if this house would eventually become hers. One evening, not long ago, while spooning fish onto her plate, she sighed loudly and said, "Evelyn, don't you feel like you're struggling, living alone in this rundown place? At your age, you should really consider a retirement home. Daniel and I are planning to have a baby soon, and we'll need more space for our growing family." Daniel said nothing. My son, the same boy who once called me every week without fail, just nodded in silence, like a shadow of the man he used to be. I looked at him, my chest tightening, then bent down to pick up a fallen napkin near my feet. "My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 70 years old. I live alone in a small wooden house by the river, its roof faded with age, its walls scarred by time. I drive a battered 1999 hatchback, its paint peeling, belching gray smoke every time I turn the ignition. Twice a week, I work part-time as a librarian at the local community center. A quiet job, few notice, but one that allows me to stay close to stories, to memory, to the truest version of myself. My clothes are mostly woolen coats I knitted decades ago. Once, Vanessa smirked and said, half laughing, "That coat? Honestly, it looks like something left over from the 1980 seconds. Why don't you ever buy something decent?" And every time she saw me get into that old car, she'd shake her head. Every time you drive that piece of junk, I worry I'll see your name in the paper under a headline. Stubborn old lady causes traffic accident. Her words, like tiny needles pricking through my thick wool layers, never made me cry, but they did leave quiet scratches across my heart. I'd grown used to judgment, but not to the pain of watching my own son no longer stand up for me. To the outside world, I was a modest widow living on a pension and a few small earnings. But that was just a mask, a story my late husband, Thomas Carter, and I had carefully crafted. Thomas once owned an international shipping company, but after his sudden death, I closed every account, hid every document, and retreated into a life of solitude. I keep a small safe tucked in the attic, filled with stock certificates, contracts, and full ownership rights to the business details that not even Daniel knows about. It was my way of protecting our legacy from greedy eyes and manipulative smiles disguised as concern. They see me as a poor, lonely old widow, surrounded by dusty furniture and fading memories. But they don't know that within this decaying wooden home lies a secret powerful enough to change the destiny of our entire family. And that secret, on that fateful winter day, began to stir. The storm was coming, and the door had just creaked open. I stepped out of the grand ballroom on the 12th floor of the Riverside Palace Hotel late that night. Beyond the glass doors, the river whines howled like the cries of a forgotten soul. Behind me, the crystal chandelier still glimmered from the high ceiling, but what clung to me wasn't light, it was the poison of whispered cruelty. Look at her, trembling like a dried-up leaf. How much longer can she even hold on? Vanessa's aunt muttered just loud enough to pierce through the distant strains of the waltz. She's right, added one of Daniel's cousins. She should be in a care home by now, someplace with round-the-clock help. No need to burden the younger generation. Each word stung like a needle in my skin, like acid seeping into wounds that hadn't healed. The scent of lilies hung heavy in the air, mixed with leftover wine clinging to the rims of abandoned glasses. The atmosphere was thick like poison slowly seeping into my bloodstream. I hadn't collapsed, but I was exhausted from constantly bracing against the storm. With a trembling hand, I reached into the worn leather purse, slung over my shoulder, a fading brown bag, the last gift Thomas gave me before he passed. The zipper screeched dryly as I opened it in the midst of all that polished elegance. Inside was my old flip phone, its scratched screen barely legible, with only a handful of numbers still saved. I dialed one I hadn't touched in over a year, partly because I naively hoped I'd never need to, and partly because a small part of me still believed in decency. The deep voice on the other end answered immediately. "Victor speaking." "It's me, Evelyn," I said, inhaling deeply, clutching the phone. "I need you to come to the Riverside Palace, right now, and bring all the documents, you know the ones I mean." There was a pause, a long breath. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "once we open that file, there's no going back. No one in your family will see you the same again. Are you sure you're ready for that?" I turned to glance back through the thick pane of glass behind me. Under the soft golden lights, Vanessa leaned into her circle of friends, laughing smugly, probably bragging about how she'd finally tamed the difficult mother-in-law. My son Daniel stood beside her like a mannequin in a tailored suit, offering an empty smile. No glance in my direction, no trace of remorse. My grip tightened on the purse strap. My eyes, now gleaming in the chandelier's glow, no longer reflected pain but resolve. The look of a woman who had been pushed too far and was finally ready to strike back. "I've been ready for a long time," I whispered, but my voice landed like a hammer. "In 28 minutes, Victor, I want every mask to fall. No one gets to walk away untouched." I hung up. The sharp click of the phone closing echoed like a verdict in the cold air. I made my way down to the parking garage. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead blinked like they were struggling to hold on. Heels clicked in the distance, mingling with the low hum of engines somewhere far off. I passed the warped shadows, stretching across the concrete walls, until I reached my old silver station wagon. its leather seats cracked, still faintly smelling of Thomas's cigarettes. Before getting in, I paused at the convex mirror mounted on the wall. My reflection stared back, distorted and unfamiliar like a metaphor for my life, misunderstood, misjudged, twisted by the eyes of those who never cared to look deeper. I slid into the driver's seat, pulled out my phone, and set the timer. 28 minutes. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound echoed like a countdown to detonation. I closed my eyes for a moment. In 45 minutes, I whispered, more vow than prediction. The ones who boxed me in will have no choice but to bow before the truth. And when the ballroom lights blaze down on that secret file, they'll finally understand. Tonight, the one on trial isn't me, it's them. I sat quietly in my car, eyes fixed on the shimmer of distant city lights dancing on the surface of the river. The timer on my phone kept ticking down, but inside me, something else was rising, a tide of memory that refused to stay buried. After 3 years of silent restraint, the dam broke. It was a cold winter afternoon when it began. The final rays of sunlight were retreating behind the cracked windows of my old apartment. A 6-story building from the 1970s, its water-stained walls and endless echoing hallways had long become my sanctuary of solitude. That day, I remember hearing Daniel's footsteps before he knocked a familiar rhythm, followed by the chill of wind and the hesitant smile of a grown man who, in that moment, looked like a nervous boy again. "Mom," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "I want you to meet someone very special." Then Vanessa appeared, her hair perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. She wore a beige designer coat that hugged her frame like it was tailored to impress. Her smile was flawless but didn't touch her eyes. She stood at my threshold like a visitor studying a specimen, her gaze sweeping across the modest space. The golden glow desk lamp, the dusty bookshelf, the worn dark wood furniture, and the faded family photos. She gave a slight nod, as if conducting an internal assessment. "Oh, I didn't expect Daniel's mother to live in such a humble place," she said sweetly. "Polite enough to pass, but sharp enough to sting if you were really listening." Daniel didn't notice. Love had made him blind. He thought she was refined, empathetic. But I wasn't so easily fooled. That evening, I served homemade herb chicken soup, Thomas's old recipe, toasted bread, a bottle of red from our old wine stash. But Vanessa merely wrinkled her nose and delicately placed her utensils aside. "I'll just have a cold juice, if that's all right," she said. Hot food tends to cling to fabric, especially wool coats. The air shifted. The soft clink of silverware on porcelain filled the silence like static, louder than any forced small talk. When I asked about her family, her answers were vague, dismissive. But when she asked about mine, her interest sharpened. "At your age," she said lightly, "living only on a pension must require a lot of budgeting. Doesn't it get tiring?" I offered a gentle smile, but inside, the chill reached my bones. That question wasn't innocent, it was a probe. From that day on, every visit Vanessa made came laced with thinly veiled critiques. "You deserve a more comfortable place," she'd say. "These walls should be repainted. These old chairs aren't great for posture." But her eyes always lingered on the balcony with a view of Central Park, the west-facing windows that caught the sunset, the wide-open living room. None of her comments were random. Then it happened. One Saturday afternoon, while Daniel was in the bathroom and I stepped into the kitchen for water, I caught her. Through the slightly ajar door, Vanessa stood near the window, her sleek phone casting a glow onto her face. Her voice was low, but every syllable sliced through the air like a blade. "Yes, Mom, the apartment overlooks the park, easily worth $500,000. Give me a few more months, I'll have it under our name." She's clueless. Still thinks I'm helping her relocate to a better place. I froze, my heart clenched like a fist. My lips pressed into a tight line, drawing blood, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. When she turned back into the room, I offered her tea with the softest smile I could manage. That sweltering summer, the heat didn't just saturate the air, it seeped into every crack of a family already rotting from within. The once warm visits between me, Daniel, and Vanessa had slowly morphed into silent tribunals, unspoken courtrooms where I sat as the accused, tried not with words, but with Vanessa's cold stares and my son's haunting silence, which cut deeper than any insult. Vanessa no longer bothered with subtlety. At first, her suggestions came wrapped in saccharine concern. "Evelyn, I came across a beautiful senior community, heated pools, full-time on-site doctors. It would be such a shame for someone like you to stay locked away in this old apartment. It's like living in a museum." Soon, her hints gave way to direct psychological warfare. "Have you ever considered what would happen if you slipped in the bathroom one night and no one found you for days? Who would be held responsible then?" Daniel, my son, my flesh and blood, began repeating her talking points like a broken record. "Mom, Vanessa only wants what's best. Please stop being so stubborn. This place is too big, too old. It's not safe for you anymore." I looked at him, the boy who once clutched his pillow at night, waiting for me to return from overtime shifts, and now he spoke with the robotic cadence of someone thoroughly programmed. My heart cracked in silence. After they announced their engagement, the manipulation turned into a cold war. Their visits grew more frequent, more rehearsed. Vanessa always arrived armed with the latest iPad, her fingers dancing across floor plans of luxury retirement complexes while her eyes never left the screen. She would set up glossy brochures on my coffee table, the same one that still bore the faint ring from Thomas's first morning coffee, and arrange them like contracts awaiting signatures. "Evelyn, I just want to make sure you have the best quality of life," she'd say with a polished smile and eyes glittering with calculation. "This apartment just isn't right for someone your age." I didn't answer, but I stopped sitting still. One afternoon, while they were out planning the wedding, I called Amelia, a longtime friend and real estate agent. "Amelia," I said quietly, "I need you to run a full financial background on two people who've suddenly taken a keen interest in my apartment." What she sent back made my stomach drop. Daniel and Vanessa were drowning in debt. Their upcoming wedding was set in a historic estate on the outskirts of town, with an estimated cost exceeding $70,000, all financed through credit cards and personal loans. Their current apartment? On the verge of eviction, 10 days left before they'd be forced to vacate. The two shiny new SUVs they drove, each costing $1,200 a month in payments far beyond what Daniel's paycheck could sustain. Everything about their glamorous life was a polished lie, and my apartment, nestled in one of the city's most valuable neighborhoods, was the only lifeboat they had left. Suddenly, every puzzle piece snapped into place: the rushed engagement, the pressure to relocate for my safety, the veiled concerns about comfort and finances. None of it came from love. It was desperation, dressed as concern. I looked at my son, the boy who once cried over lost toys and believed in justice, now standing still, letting this woman turn his mother into a line item on a financial spreadsheet. 3 days before the wedding, Vanessa arrived alone. Her usual smile was gone. "Evelyn, the wedding is in 3 days. We've already invested nearly $70,000 into this. Do you really want to be the reason it all falls apart?" Her voice was soft but dripping with accusation. "All you have to do is sign the papers and everything will be much easier." The mask of false kindness had finally slipped. What remained was naked entitlement disguised as family mercy. That night, I called Victor Allen, my late husband Thomas's most trusted financial advisor. "Victor," I said, my voice low but steady, "I need you to bring me every document, every file. Tonight, we're not just unmasking them, we're ending this farce once and for all." There was silence for a few seconds. Then his voice dropped into a solemn register. "Evelyn, are you sure? Once this is set in motion, there's no going back. It'll tear apart what's left of your family." I stared into the darkness outside my window. I've protected this family with silence for too long, but silence has become the accomplice to their betrayal. It's time I spoke, and now I wait. In the dim underground garage of the Grand Imperial Hotel, I sit in my faded silver hatchback. The radio hums faintly with a storm advisory. The worn leather seat creaks as I clutch a document case to my chest like it holds my very soul. 37 minutes to go. 37 minutes until Vanessa, Daniel, and every person who's looked at me with pity will finally know who Evelyn Carter truly is. 37 minutes until their golden illusion crumbles like a sandcastle under thunderous waves. The wind rustles the trees above. The shadows stretch long across the pavement, like a ghost waiting to rise not to die, but to resurrect. I close my eyes for a moment, letting the painful memories flood back like a tide. I must remember every detail, every betrayal, so that I never question why I'm sitting here, at this irreversible point in time. Then I open my eyes, and something has changed. The fire is back. Just 10 days before the wedding, on a stormy afternoon, they arrived at my house, not with flowers or cake, but with an ambush orchestrated like a military operation. Thunder rolled outside the window, rain tapping the glass like ominous knocks from fate itself. The yellow light in the living room flickered with unstable electricity, casting the entire room in the atmosphere of a secret courtroom where I, once the host, had now become the accused. Vanessa entered first, rain still clinging to her sleeves, dragging Daniel and her parents behind her, a perfectly cast trio of prosecutor, judge, and executioner. I recognized her father's eyes instantly, not the eyes of a man seeing people, but of someone assessing assets. Her mother stood arrogantly in her cashmere coat, as if the floor beneath her feet wasn't worthy of her shoes. "Evelyn, it's time to stop living in fantasy," her mother began, her voice dripping with unhidden contempt. "At your age, you shouldn't be making important decisions anymore. Your future should be entrusted to someone responsible. This house is outdated, the wooden stairs are worn, and the wiring is faulty," her father added, placing a glossy leather briefcase on the table. "If there were a fire in the middle of the night, who would save you? This apartment is no longer safe for someone your age." On the old oak dining table, where warm family dinners once unfolded, they spread out a printed contract, brochures for upscale senior living facilities, and a financial breakdown. Daniel sat across from me, nervously twisting his wedding ring, eyes fixed on the floor, nodding like a man selling his own bloodline. "Mom, please don't be stubborn," he said, his voice strained with tension but unmistakably distant. "Vanessa and I only want what's best for you. Moving out is the only logical option." My hands clenched beneath the table as I steadied my voice. "And who gave you the right to decide what's logical for me?" Vanessa's mother smirked at her husband, a victorious smile from someone who had just pushed the prey into a trap. "Evelyn, in the luxury care facility, you'll have a private nurse, yoga classes, a reading room," Vanessa added sweetly, her voice soft as velvet but sharp as a knife. "Right now, all you have are four walls and loneliness. Don't you want to be taken care of?" I looked into her eyes. There was no concern left, only strategy. She wasn't offering help. She was removing an obstacle. "And what do you think I'm feeling now, Vanessa?" I asked, my lips tight. She didn't blink. Loneliness, financial instability, fear of not being able to care for yourself. "At your age, that's normal, Evelyn. You don't need to be ashamed of needing help." The audacity in her tone sent a chill down my spine. To them, I was no longer a person. I was a piece of property in the way of their luxurious dream. "The average cost is $3,200 a month," her father chimed in, opening his briefcase to reveal a thick stack of papers. "If you sell this apartment, you'd have just enough to cover it, with a little left to support the young couple starting their married life." I turned to Daniel. No protest, no hesitation, no eye contact. Just the silence of someone complicit. "And if I refuse?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Daniel took a deep breath, then delivered his lines like reading from a rehearsed script. "Mom, I don't want this to go too far, but if a doctor confirms you're no longer mentally sound, the court can make decisions for you. I don't want that to happen, but..." The threat of legal guardianship was spoken. In that moment, I no longer recognized the boy I once held through fevered nights. Standing before me was a stranger, allowing others to carve into his mother's heart without flinching. They left soon after, contract unsigned, leaving behind only a polite reminder that I should think about everyone. But the storm outside had already seeped into my bones. I stayed behind, alone, beside a cold pot of coffee that no one had touched. Rain trickled through the window frame, drumming on the wooden floor like a ticking clock. I wasn't crying from sadness. I cried because I realized the final ember of warmth I had for my family had burned out. I picked up the phone and called Victor Allen, my voice trembling but resolute. "Dig everything up. I want to know every debt, every lie. Leave no stone unturned." And what Victor uncovered was a collapsing house built in the shape of a wedding. Daniel, the son I once believed to be honest, was making $52,000 a year as a sales manager, but owed over $95,000 in credit card debt. He had taken out an additional $35,000 in high-interest loans just to keep up with the wedding bills. Vanessa, who ran a luxury beauty service online, was spending 10 times more than she earned, blowing money on designer clothes, spa treatments, and rented cars. Their total debt had ballooned to over $150,000 on top of the $75,000 wedding venue, still awaiting loan approval from the bank. It was all a facade, a life built on sand. And I, the widow, the burden, the mother they tried to cast aside, was the last wooden beam keeping their illusion from collapsing. I closed the phone and stood. Only 20 minutes remained. And soon, every lie would fall layer by layer like masks melting in the storm. 45 minutes before the grand dinner reception at the 5-star hotel, I sat alone in a faded hatchback, parked in the damp basement of a commercial complex. The flickering fluorescent lights above buzzed like a countdown clock. Rain pounded on the concrete roof, and the rising humidity made the space feel more like an interrogation chamber than a garage. Beside me on the passenger seat was a dark wooden box with a small brass lock, once hidden for decades in a secret compartment behind the oak bookshelf, a place only Thomas and I ever knew existed. As I opened the first envelope, the rustle of paper echoed like a death sentence. These weren't just numbers on a page, they were facts, power, and the last weapon I had left to confront those who once called me family. Victor Allen had sent the summary report ahead of time, and within it was the detail that turned my heart to ash. For the past 6 months, Daniel had been quietly contacting banks and insurance companies, inquiring about mortgage options using his elderly mother's assets. He had even researched legal steps to obtain financial control over me. My son, the same child I once held in trembling arms on the night he was born. Now, he was scheming to seize my assets, as if orchestrating a corporate takeover, methodical, calculated, cold. But the real dagger lay at the end of the report, a statement from a private investigator hired by Victor. Vanessa Blake had boasted to her friends that she sacrificed herself by getting engaged to an older, less attractive man, solely because his mother owned substantial assets and had no obvious heirs. For her, this marriage wasn't about love, it was a strategic investment. I sat there, hands clutching the steering wheel, throat parched. I had hoped that if I exposed the financial truth, they might stop. But this wasn't desperation. This was greed. Greed so ruthless it had consumed the soul of my own child. The days leading up to the wedding were torture. Daniel called daily, his tone as flat as a script. "Mom, Vanessa just wants what's best. Please reconsider." Vanessa herself swept in like a cold front, each word laced with venom. "Evelyn, the more you cling, the more of a burden you become. A senile old woman should know when to step aside." The night before the wedding, Daniel tried one last time. His face blurred behind the rain-streaked window as he said, "Mom, tomorrow the whole city will witness the beginning of my new life. Please don't ruin it out of pride." The person speaking wasn't the boy who once cried, "Mommy," during fevered nights. He was a man who had chosen greed as his guiding principle. My hands trembling, I dialed Joseph, my 4-year-old neighbor, a retired history teacher who had lived next door for over a decade. "Joseph, I need you to go into the house. Get the dark wooden box behind the bookshelf, the one with the small lock. Bring it to the basement, right now." Joseph had been the first to suspect Vanessa. He once saw her sneaking a real estate appraiser into my apartment without notice. "Evelyn." She brought a man with a briefcase. When I confronted them, they left quickly. It didn't sit right with me. And he also told me, "Your son doesn't greet me anymore. He used to ask about new history books. Now he just walks fast, like he's avoiding eye contact." 10 minutes later, Joseph appeared, oak cane tapping on the concrete floor, holding the old wooden box. "Evelyn, what's going on? You're shaking." I gave him a brief summary. His face darkened like a September sky. "Evelyn, I taught history all my life. I know how to spot traitors. She's no different from those who sold out their allies for a few pieces of gold." I gripped his hand. "Victor is on his way. When he arrives, tell him I'm here. And Joseph, after tonight, everything will change. But you will always be my family." Eyes misty, Joseph placed his hand on my shoulder. "You're my family too, Evelyn. Do what you have to do." I opened the box. The first document, an investment portfolio worth $7.2 million, scattered across multinational funds. Next, the deed to an 8-story office building downtown, generating $65,000 in monthly rent. Then, ownership papers for a coastal villa, purchased 15 years ago, now quadrupled in value. All were the result of a life lived modestly, quietly, to build a fortress of safety. Thomas always said, "Flaunted wealth invites trouble. Invisible assets hold true power." I never thought that power would be used against my own son. I pulled out another bundle, 3 years' worth of bank transfers. Each line clear, $6,000 per month for 42 months straight, over $250,000 total. All sent to Daniel, who thought they were bonuses, miracles, generosity from a kind landlord. No, it was me. I kept his drowning ship afloat. I funded the very wedding they were now using to discard me. The clock struck 11:55 p.m. 5 more minutes. Above, through the ventilation shafts, jazz music trickled down, mingled with laughter and the clink of glasses. A dazzling world about to be shattered by the storm of truth. Victor was on his way, bringing certified documents, a voice recorder, and the silent judgment of justice. I whispered to myself, "This isn't revenge, this is restoration." And those who chose greed over blood must now face the scales of justice. Tonight, the final mask will fall, and Evelyn Carter will no longer be the woman hidden behind the curtain. She will be the one who ends the game. It was 11:45 p.m. in the damp, dim parking basement of the 5-star hotel. The only light came from flickering fluorescent bulbs that buzzed like a countdown to detonation. The air was thick, laced with the scent of oil and damp concrete, as if we were standing in an underground interrogation room rather than a luxury venue. Suddenly, a pair of headlights pierced through the darkness like a blade of light. I squinted. Victor Allen had arrived. Punctual, as always. But this time, he wasn't just bringing documents, he was bringing justice. The black leather briefcase in his hand, sealed with steel clasps, looked more like a weapon of law than an accessory. As he stepped out of the car, rain dripped from the concrete roof onto his coat. I opened my car door, my leather shoes striking the stone floor with a crisp, cold echo, the sound of a verdict walking closer. "Evelyn," Victor said, his deep voice rolling through the garage like thunder over a mountain. You know what lies beyond that ballroom door isn't just a wedding. It's a battlefield. Once you walk in, there will be no mother and son, only truth and betrayal. I took a deep breath. My gaze no longer trembled. All my life, I've lived to protect them, I replied. But tonight, I live to protect myself, and truth will be the only weapon I need. We stood beside the car in the murky light. Victor opened the case and pulled out a thick stack of files, a secured USB drive, and a sleek black Mont Blanc pen, the last gift Thomas gave me before he passed. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of this moment. This is the immediate suspension order for all bank transfers under Daniel Carter's name, Victor stated, his tone professional, though his eyes flickered with emotion. This is the notice to terminate the apartment lease you once co-signed, along with the withdrawal of your $80,000 vehicle loan guarantee and the cancellation of the platinum credit card support. And this, he said, holding up the final document, is the cancellation of the ballroom deposit. $50,000 will be reclaimed tonight. The invoice will go straight into the hands of the newlyweds. And the reception? I asked, glancing up toward the ceiling, where jazz music and wine glasses clinked above like a mocking lullaby. Victor pressed his lips into a thin line. It'll collapse before the wedding cake is even sliced. I took each document in turn, signing them with the Mont Blanc pen, like a sword slicing through the chains that bound me to a son who had betrayed me. Each stroke of ink sounded like a blade tearing through years of false appearances. Victor, I want you to understand this clearly, I said, each word rising from the depths of my soul. This isn't revenge, it's balance. And anyone who chose greed over blood must now face the scale of justice. Victor nodded, his stern eyes softening. In my 30 years as a financial advisor, I've seen families sell their souls for money, he whispered. But very few had the strength to reclaim theirs by sacrificing motherhood. You're one of the rare few. I packed the documents into my worn leather bag. No one would suspect that the woman they called a burden, a senile old lady, now held the entire financial fate of their lives in her hands, like a judge holding a sentence. My footsteps echoed through the marble hallway, cutting through the cold silence of the night. With each step, I was no longer just a mother. I was a witness, a judge, an executor walking toward her final ruling. The grand clock in the main lobby struck 12 times. The wedding was over. The trial was about to begin. Setting: Grand Ballroom, 5-star hotel, 11:30 p.m. The crescendo of jazz was abruptly silenced. A microphone clattered to the floor. The tinkling of silver against crystal ceased mid-toast, and the flickering chandeliers overhead seemed to cast judgment rather than light. Over 130 guests turned simultaneously as Evelyn Carter and Victor Allen stepped into the ballroom onto a social stage that no one had prepared for. Vanessa Blake, dressed in her crystal-studded wedding gown, stormed forward, voice shrill and shaking. "You have no right to be here. This is our night, not a stage for your drama." Evelyn said nothing. In her hand, she held a sleek black Mont Blanc pen, the very one that had signed off the financial fate of the evening. Victor Allen calmly stepped to the microphone. "Apologies for the interruption, but I have several legal matters that must be addressed immediately with Mr. Daniel Carter and Miss Vanessa Blake." The crowd buzzed. Phones were pulled out. Live streams started. Cameras panned sharply to Daniel's and Vanessa's stunned faces. Daniel Carter approached, wiping sweat from his brow, face pale. "Mom, why is there a lawyer here? This is a wedding, not a courtroom." Evelyn replied with quiet steel. "Tonight is not the beginning of a new life for you, it's the beginning of the truth. And the truth needs no veil or music to be heard." Victor unlocked a silver briefcase with a cold metallic click. "Effective immediately, Mr. Daniel Carter, Mrs. Evelyn Carter has revoked all financial guarantees, including the apartment lease, the $80,000 car loan, and the platinum credit card sponsorship." The $6,000 monthly allowance provided over the last 5 years, totaling more than $350,000, will be permanently terminated. And the $65,000 deposit covering tonight's celebration has been withdrawn. The hotel management is authorized to demand full payment by midnight. Gasps erupted across the room. Vanessa staggered. Daniel stood frozen. Guests whispered and replayed clips, particularly the one where Vanessa slapped Evelyn just days earlier. Evelyn turned to her son, gaze unwavering. 35 years ago, you placed me in a circle of manipulation, and I thought I was helping you survive. But all I did was hand you the rope to tighten around me. Victor raised a sealed red envelope. This is the most recent will and testament. Mrs. Evelyn Carter has officially transferred her entire estate, including a $7.2 million investment portfolio, Central City Properties, and the Beach House, to the National Trust for the Protection of Elderly Victims of Family Abuse. Vanessa shrieked, clutching her head, eyes wide with disbelief. No, you can't do this. That's family money. Daniel is your only son. Evelyn's voice was cold as stone. Family is not a title you claim to justify theft. Family is a sanctuary, not a weapon. You chose to be strangers long ago. The clock struck midnight. The echo rang through the ballroom like a verdict. Evelyn stepped into the center of the room, turning once to Daniel. Tonight, you haven't just lost an inheritance, you've lost a mother. And with that, she turned away. The sound of her heels striking the marble floor followed her exit like the gavel of a final judgment. Location: Grand Hotel Ballroom, 11:45 p.m. The violin faltered mid-crescendo. The chandelier trembled overhead, casting flickering light as if signaling the fracture of a story built on illusion. While Vanessa Blake stumbled into the photo backdrop, crashing into flower arrangements and toppling champagne flutes, Daniel Carter ripped open his shirt collar, gasping for air. Victor Allen calmly shut the steel case and clicked the locks shut. His tone was low but firm. Mrs. Carter, all documents have been served. Legal effect is immediate. Vanessa screamed in anguish. No! You've destroyed our entire lives in a single night. Evelyn Carter stepped forward. Tonight wasn't your wedding, Vanessa. It was the night your mask slipped. And when the mask comes off, no one believes in your little love story anymore. Daniel pleaded. Mom, there are over 100 people here. Are you really going to humiliate me in front of the entire city? Evelyn shook her head slowly. No, Daniel. You humiliated yourself the moment you sold your soul in exchange for a white wedding gown. Martinez, the ballroom manager, arrived with a red invoice folder. His voice was grave. Mrs. Carter, we've received formal notice of financial withdrawal. There remains an unpaid balance of $78,000. Who will cover the cost? Vanessa snapped, wild-eyed. No, this is our wedding day. Martinez replied calmly. I'm not ruining anything. I'm fulfilling contract terms. Without payment, I'll have to terminate the event. Evelyn's voice was icy. I didn't cancel anything. You did when you chose manipulation over honesty, when you saw your own mother as a bank account. Vanessa gasped. Then what are we supposed to do now? Pay with what? Evelyn. With labor, with integrity, with your own 2 adult hands. Lucy approached, teary-eyed. Aunt Evelyn, I didn't know any of this. I'm so sorry. Evelyn, I know. You've always been different. Remember this. Character is measured by how we treat the ones we claim to love. 3 days later, Evelyn Carter's apartment was bathed in golden morning light. The bouquet of Joseph's rose blossoms still glistened with dew on her counter. The phone rang incessantly. 2 missed calls from Daniel. 26 text messages from Vanessa, each filled with demands, apologies, or accusations. On her doorstep lay a withered bouquet of apology, roses hurled and crushed along with a scribbled note. You will pay for this. Victor Allen arrived with updates. Daniel and Vanessa had been evicted from the house. The hotel was filing a $78,000 lawsuit. Their credit cards were frozen. That same afternoon, Lucy, Amelia, and Joseph showed up with a disturbing file. Vanessa had consulted an inheritance attorney and filed a motion to declare Evelyn legally incompetent. Victor explained, 10 witness statements so far, 4 from intoxicated guests, 2 from Vanessa's own family who say she promised to repay everything. But there was hope. 3 videos had gone viral. Vanessa slapping Evelyn, Victor reading the will aloud, and Evelyn's powerful speech about what family truly means. The hashtag number Evelyn will not be silenced became a symbol. Victor nodded. Public opinion is shifting in our favor. It won't be easy for a court to label someone celebrated for dignity and reason as incompetent. The battle wasn't over. But Evelyn was no longer fighting out of illness or desperation. She was fighting for honor, for the silenced elderly, for every parent discarded in the shadows. And Evelyn Carter would no longer be silent. "There's one more thing I need to do," I said, my voice calm but sharp as a blade, rising from the window seat where I had watched the rain fall for 3 days straight. The metal-shaded lamp cast a narrow halo of light across the wooden desk, where a mini recorder quietly documented every word and every minute of legal counsel. If Daniel and Vanessa want to turn this into a public legal war, they're about to learn they picked the wrong opponent. I moved toward the bookshelf and opened the hidden compartment behind a row of vintage novels. Inside was a dark wooden box, locked with a polished brass clasp. I placed it on the desk, unlocked it, and revealed its contents. Hardbound legal files sealed in red wax, an encrypted USB, time-stamped photos of bruises on my cheekbone, CT scan results, and an emergency room report signed by a doctor. Victor had organized it all, along with a private investigator's report and logs of threatening phone calls. Beside me, Attorney Ha Min, her silver hair in a tight bun, rimmed glasses gleaming, nodded with precision. "You don't have to raise your voice to win. You just need the right evidence at the right time." "They wanted to drag me into the courtroom spotlight," I replied. "Fine. Then I'll turn on every light." Victor opened the final file. "All prior powers of attorney have been revoked. Effective immediately, they can't access a single cent of interest income. We're countersuing for defamation, legal abuse, and we're filing a restraining order against Vanessa. We also have an independent cognitive evaluation from a licensed neurologist, MoCA score of 29 out of 30, irrefutable proof against their claim of mental incompetence." 9 months later, a stormy night. Rain lashed against the glass of the Art Deco National Television studio. Inside, beneath soft frosted panels and a long line of Fresnel lights, the atmosphere was reverent and tense. The red LED countdown lit up. I sat across from host Catherine Diaz, famous for cutting through facades to uncover truth. Victor sat beside me in a tailored suit. Hand resting on a black briefcase, locked with a code inside, were full scans, legal evidence, private investigator contracts, and an open letter to the National Council on Elder Justice. In the audience, Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia waited silently. Outside, thunder echoed like the judgment of fate. "Tonight, you'll hear a story that redraws the line between family and legal entrapment," Catherine began. I straightened my back, my gaze steady. My voice cut through the studio air. "I'm not here for applause. I'm just glad the truth finally has a voice, and it's no longer being silenced in the name of family." When Catherine asked about the breaking point, I didn't flinch. When her hand struck my face, I heard glass shatter. But what truly shattered was my silence. Victor added, "This is a common pattern. Caregiving as camouflage, guardianship as a blade. We used the law to wrap that blade and stop it from cutting anyone else." The countersuit was a resounding victory. Daniel and Vanessa were ordered to repay a total of $72,500 in legal and expert witness fees. Daniel was indefinitely suspended from work. Vanessa lost 11 contracts in 2 weeks. My story exploded on social media. The hashtag number Evelyn Won't Be Silenced hit the top 5 trends with 5.8 million views in just 19 days. Support groups for those manipulated by their own families began to multiply. Catherine turned and asked, "If your son is watching, what would you say to him?" I looked straight into the camera. "Daniel, I still love you because you are my son, but love does not mean allowing abuse. Love does not mean sacrificing dignity for your convenience. My door will be open when your conscience opens, not before." Then I turned to the audience. To anyone who sees themselves in this story, I say this: no matter your age, you have the right to be treated with dignity. You have the right to say no. You have the right to seek legal protection, and you have the right not to be silent. The studio lights dimmed. Outside, the rain tapped against the glass like the applause of the universe, and I knew my story was no longer a family tragedy. It was a testimony, a reckoning, a beacon for those still afraid to speak. Exactly 25 months after that fateful wedding night, on a misty winter evening, I found myself sitting on the attic balcony, an old wooden chair beside a small electric fireplace, the paper lanterns glowing gently in a city that had completely changed. The wind slipped through the cracks of the door, but I felt only warmth within. It was no longer the silent balcony where I endured my daughter-in-law's mocking stares, but now a high watchtower from which I saw the world through the eyes of someone who had walked through darkness and come out whole. My phone vibrated, not a call, but a notification from the secure network of the Evelyn Carter Foundation for Elder Protection. 28 new cases this week. 4 in suburban homes, 2 in nursing facilities, 1 transferred from police reports. Carmen no longer had to make direct calls. Now, we operated with tracking dashboards, heat maps, and rapid response teams like a professional humanitarian organization. Every number represented a life, a painful story, but one no longer silenced. I stepped into the office, once Daniel's childhood room, now a community intake space. The walls were lined with framed photos of reunited families, honorary degrees, and a vivid oil painting of me that Thomas had painted when I was 42, his gaze soft, trusting the woman who never bowed to shame. The digital board on the wall read, 650 cases supported, vertical bar, 140 legal victories, vertical bar, $5.2 million in assets reclaimed. A testament to 2 years of relentless, unwavering effort. Lucy entered, holding a national magazine featuring me on the cover. "You know, Aunt Evelyn, they're calling you the lighthouse against domestic darkness." "I've never felt prouder." Joseph followed behind with a stack of lecture notes. "At 72, I thought I'd spend my days playing chess. Now I lecture law students on emotional manipulation within family dynamics. Life redirected me at just the right moment." Victor Allen switched on the projector during our monthly meeting. The financial graph spiked vertically, the number $5.2 million bold and undeniable. I've never seen a fund grow at this rate in just 24 months. This isn't just idealism, this is evidence. Justice can be structured, scaled, and spread. My co-authored book sold over 350,000 copies, translated into 6 languages. The audiobook topped the charts for 12 consecutive weeks. I didn't write for fame, I wrote so that anyone, whether 68 or 88, would know they are not alone. The most moving letter came from an 81-year-old woman in Nebraska. "You named my pain, and when pain is named, it no longer controls me." People often ask, "Do you still think about Daniel?" I remember the small hand that gripped mine on his first day of school, the innocent eyes that once believed I was the safest place on earth. But I do not remember the man who sold out his own mother for a few extra zeros in his bank account. In 2 years, he contacted me 4 times, always to ask for money, never to apologize, never to acknowledge his wrongs. The last message was a handwritten note in jagged lines. "You're choosing pride over your grandson?" I looked at that letter and thought, yes, and you should learn to choose integrity over your own greed. Leo, my grandson, is now 14 months old. He doesn't know who I am. Vanessa erased every photo of me. The only keepsake I have is a tiny wool sock she left behind in her suitcase, a quiet symbol of hope that someday this child will grow up, search for the truth, and choose to find his grandmother. My health has never been better. Dr. Morales, who once treated my depression, gasped at my latest test results. "You're like a 8-year-old woman." I've never seen stress dissipate so quickly once the source of toxicity was removed. I stand taller, my voice steadier, and my hands no longer tremble when signing 7-figure documents. My community garden has now become a rooftop glasshouse. I teach seniors how to grow healing herbs, a sanctuary where aging is not decline, but wisdom. I call it the therapy garden. My calendar is full. 3 days a week at the Foundation's main office, 2 days for house visits, and weekends devoted to writing my second book, a strategic guide to identifying and preventing financial abuse within families. Just last week, Margaret, age 74, reclaimed the car her son had pawned. She sent a photo next to her new vehicle with a note. "Evelyn, you taught me that setting boundaries is not cruelty, it's survival. Loving myself is not selfish, it's necessary, and it's never too late to rise." If I could go back to that night, walking into the ballroom, hands shaking, heart racing, fear pulsing through every vein, I would lean in and whisper to that frightened woman, "Be brave. What's coming will hurt. But on the other side of that pain is a life more real than anything you've ever known. There is light there, and no one will ever again have the right to call you a burden." Tonight, I close my leather journal and blow out the candle on my desk. Tomorrow, I walk into Parliament to advocate for legislation protecting elders from exploitation. Next week, I launch our 3rd regional center. Next month, I appear on national television for a new documentary series. At 70, my life isn't a fairy tale, but it is real. And in that reality, I've discovered the most beautiful truth: liberation. Ending a toxic relationship is not a loss, it is the beginning. True family is not just who shares your blood, it's who chooses to stand with you when you draw the line. And it is never too late to write a new chapter with hands that hold the pen steady. Do I regret that fateful night? Not for a single moment. Because that very moment of pain became the turning point when I reclaimed my dignity, learned what it truly meant to love myself, and transformed my wounds into strength. Life doesn't always hand us sweet endings, but it always gives us a choice: stay silent and endure, or rise and write a new story. And the message I want to leave you with today is this: true family is built on respect and love, not on ambition or manipulation. Never trade your self-worth for someone else's approval. You deserve to be treated with dignity at any age, in any situation. If this story touched something within you, I invite you to leave a comment below, whether it's a heartfelt reflection or simply the words, "I choose dignity." Together, let's create a space that radiates respect and compassion. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and explore the next story waiting for you below the screen. Thank you for being here, for your kindness, your presence, and your listening heart. I'll see you in the next chapter with all my love and respect.